Madam Chair, just so you know, we are at our appointed time. However, we are one short on quorum at this moment. Do what we can to one more person. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have staff checking on a couple of our members. Thanks.
This is the best meeting ever.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the committee, this is Nathan Pryor from Ag Staff. We are working through MESA government relations, Peoria government relations, and directly with Phoenix, I believe Fire, to round up at least one more committee member to make quorum. So apologize for the delay. Madam Chair, those on the line, it is a quarter after. We've gotten one word that from one of the members that can't track that person down. I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair as to whether to continue waiting or we can reschedule this meeting for another time. I apologize.
Do we want to give it another 5 minutes and then we can call it?
Okay, thank you.
Hey team, this is Rain Gray. I just joined the meeting if that's helpful.
And Mr. Gray, you represent Phoenix Fire, is that correct?
That is correct.
Madam Chair, we do have.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the MAG 911 Oversight Team. This meeting is now called to order. For those around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking. For those participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or asking a question. The MAG public comment process allows members of the public to comment on items on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. If you would like to comment at today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway and give it to MAG staff. If you parked in the garage, parking validators are available on the information table in the hallway. If you purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. We will now begin the meeting with a roll call of all members.
Thank you, Chair. I will go through the list of members. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Avondale PD Chief Castro Vinci.
Present.
Buckeye PD Robert Sanders or Jim Totora.
Jim Totora in lieu of Deputy Chief Robert Sanders.
Thank you. Chandler PD Michelle Potts.
Present.
Glendale PD Brent Axon.
Brent Axane, present.
Goodyear PD Chief Rodriguez.
Present.
MCSO Sheriff's Office Patrick Melvin. Mesa Fire and Medical Department Chief Forrest Smith. Peoria Fire Department Fire and Medical Department Chief Gary Bernard. Phoenix Fire Department Rain Gray in for Chief Walker.
Rain Gray is present.
Phoenix PD Jesse Cooper. Scottsdale PD Vice Chair Bokinski. Tempe PD Chief Masters.
Kathy Masters, present.
Chair, we have a quorum. Is there anyone on the line that I've missed? Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. Our next item is a call to the audience. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Have we received any requests?
Madam Chair, we have received no public comment requests.
Thank you. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website 1 hour prior to the meeting. Ms. Graber, do we have any written comments for this item?
We have received no written comments.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3, approval of the consent agenda. Items 3A through 3C are on the consent agenda for today. Does any member of the committee have questions on any of these items? Prior to approval of the consent agenda, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on any items on consent? Have we received any comments on this, Ms. Graber?
Madam Chair, we received no comments on the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve consent items 3A through 3C?
Brent Axane from Glendale, Moves that we approve these minutes.
Okay, we have a motion from Brent Axing, Glendale PD. Do we have a second?
I can second.
Rain Gray seconds.
We have a second from Chief Rodriguez, Goodyear Police Department. Can I have a voice vote of those in the room? Those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Ms. Graber, can you please take a roll call of the members participating virtually?
Thank you. Buckeye PD, Jim Totora,
Aye.
Brent Axine, Glendale PD,
Aye.
Chief Gray, Phoenix Fire,
Aye.
and Chief Masters, Tempe PD.
Aye.
Is there anyone that I've missed? Madam Chair, appears the motion has passed.
Thank you. The next agenda item is the administrator report. Ms. Graber, 911 Administrator, will provide this report.
Thank you. So there we go. We can go to our slide. So here's an update as we're getting close to the end of the year of our couple of data points that we track. The first one is our Community Emergency Notification System, or SENS. We are at 134 as of November 30th. This is on trend to where we normally have been. This is not quite a record year, but it's in the running. So by the end of December, we'll know if we surpass past numbers that we've been able to do. But 134 to November is a good, healthy number. Next, we have our text to 911, and text to 911 has really took a leap this year. As you can see, our monthly average is up from 944 for the monthly average for text sessions. And when we say text sessions, just to help the committee understand, that is not every time somebody writes something. If you have a call come in and they are texting back and forth, that's considered one session, not every time a text is received, if that makes sense. So we are year to date well over 10,382. And last year, our total for the whole year was 8,239. And we have surpassed that greatly. So that's exciting news that text to 911 is working. I want to extend a MAG appreciation, because when we gave this report last week in our PSAP managers meeting, they recognized the accomplishment and tweeted it out to their citizens to help remind them to call when you can, text if you can't, and to acknowledge that text is being used more and more. And that is the end of my administrator report.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. Are there any questions or comments from the membership? I do have one maybe question or comment. So last time, I believe we talked about ADT having that integration for alarms coming through text to 911. And so MCSO, I think, is paving the way on that one. Has anybody else joined in on that, or is it just MCSO at this point?
MCSO is the only PSAP that is getting text to 911 from ADT reference alarm reporting. And that contributes to our jump in numbers.
Do we know what kind of impact it's had on, say, calls for service or call volume that it's had on the PSAP?
We talked to Jim Stillwell, who's a PSAP rep at MCSO, and it hasn't had too much of an impact on it. There are some anomalies they have to get used to on receiving that information, but for the most part, it helps their call volume go down, and they're able to get help to the alarm companies with all the information without them making a call.
I think this would be an interesting one to track over some time because I think with everybody's staffing issues that they have, we all have in the PSAP, anything we can do to lower that call volume kind of impacts our staffing levels. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of impact it has on that moving forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? In the interest of time, Mr. Pryor has another engagement, so we're going to skip to agenda item number 11. And this is an update on the activities of the 911 Study Committee. MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor will provide this update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Oversight team. Recognizing we have a number of new members to this committee, so I'm going to provide a little bit more historical context and background of the 911 Study Committee, its work in previous years, and jump to currently the activities of that study committee. So the study committee in composition is as implied, a study committee of 911 issues. It's co-chaired previously 6 years ago and currently co-chaired by Chris Brady, city manager of Mesa, and Kevin Phelps, the city manager of Glendale. In the past, so go back to 2016, Maricopa Region 911 was at a point in conversations contemplating potential move to managed services. At that time, it was CenturyLink. So we convened a study committee to review this. There were a number of meetings reviewing the proposed managed services approach. At that time, the decision was to continue on with existing MR 911 services, operations in our system. The study committee moved to bring a consultant independent review of 911 services in the region, and that consultant helped us develop a 7-year plan. We are currently in end of year 6 of that 7-year plan. So it's a good time to check in with the developments to date, get an update as to the status of our region related to 911 and the plan as we head into year 7. But also we are kind of back to a point where managed services is being proposed again. This time largely through AT&T. Know this has caused quite a bit of conversation in our region. So again, an opportunity to reconvene that study committee, look at the proposal, and also, and I'll get a little bit more into the details, but also kind of look at our region and then compare ourselves to other major metros and kind of map and see the needs of our region going forward. So with that, the current composition, as I mentioned, co-chaired by Chris Brady and Kevin Phelps. We've added 2 more city managers, Dan Cotterman from Buckeye and Joshua Wright from Chandler. We continue to have our chair and vice chair from this committee. Also the PSAP managers, we have the chair and vice chair of that committee as well. And the chair of the MAG Technical Advisory Group, as well as a number of police representatives. There has been one meeting that was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. At that time, it was a good conversation regarding just kind of baseline understanding, common understanding of our regional 911 system, discussing the efforts of the study committee, kind of starting to map that path forward. The direction from the study committee was to start working on a draft scope for a consultant. There has been a subgroup meeting of the committee working to prepare that draft scope. A lot of back and forth to our co-chairs as well, getting their input, making sure that we're on the right path. That draft scope has been developed. It's in 3 tasks. The first one being kind of an initial assessment of our regional 911 system and where we think we want to go. As well as 2 other tasks, kind of mapping out the next few months potentially of a consultant's work, really doing that kind of comparative, if you will, of other major metro areas and digging in, rolling up sleeves in terms of our existing system and again, where we want to go. The study committee is scheduled to meet this Monday So that will be the second meeting of study committee to review that draft scope. The hope is that that scope will be finalized with more input from the full study committee. We'll also be talking about more of the considerations for the consultant selection process, as well as getting a few other updates from Liz Graber as Regional 911 Administrator. It's foreseen that if we go on a similar path from 6 years ago, that committee met for a period of 6 months or so, again, working with the consultant for independent review, development of a plan. Right now, it's somewhat undetermined if we are simply going to pursue development of a plan. Are we going to pursue an alternative with managed services? Is there going to be something in between? So a lot more conversations to take place with the study committee. We're grateful to have inputs from this committee and the PSAP managers as well. So there'll be a lot of kind of running trap lines up and down, if you will, between the three committees, getting input, making sure we're on a good path in service to our member agencies, and again, mapping our regional 911 future. So, Madam Chair, that's the study committee update. We'll be looking to have this as a standing item for the foreseeable future, providing updates to this committee, and any inputs and questions will relate to the study committee. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pryor. Are there any questions or comments from the membership? All right, if not, we'll go back to agenda 5. The next agenda item is a report on the activities of the MAG PSAP Managers Group. MAG PSAP Managers Group Chair Brittany Brunet will provide this report.
Madam Chair, Ms. Brunet is out ill, so she will be unable to make this report.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item is an ongoing discussion on 911 funding and the state 911 grant. Provide this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I provided this report to the PSAP managers last week. We thought it would be useful to go a little bit more into the budgeting process that we have for the Maricopa region. Tracking. We have set goals out to be able to do this report for the PSAPs managers, and as well as the 911 oversight at every meeting, just to give an idea of where we're at any time. If there are a certain type of report that you would like to receive, if you let me know, we can get those developed and see if we can pull those together for our the next meetings. But hopefully we'll be able to report everything that you're looking for. So when we're in the middle of transitioning, as you've heard, and we'll talk about more as next generation 911. So back in the day when 911 began, there was only wireline. So there was no need to categorize or anything like that. There was just one bill that you paid, very simple. And then when wireless came along in the early 2000s, the state at that time determined everything would be under wireline except what is paid to have wireless, so they could track what the difference is between wireless and wireline costs. So things like maintenance, networking, upgrades, new equipment, spares, anything that had to do with PSAP or anything else was considered wireline, and then just the networking cost for wireless. But now that's irrelevant at this point, as well as the concept of NG 911, because we are at that precipice now. So it's not necessarily next generation, it's now generation, if it were. So trying to get that transition into new verbiage that reflects what we do at this day instead of what we've been used in the past. So we're kind of in the middle of that. You might see wireline, wireless terms, and that's why. One of our biggest budgets is the monthly contracts. These are what we pay the contract, are the telecom companies, and anything that has a monthly reoccurring bill. It's not a one-time purchase. This is something we pay for fiber, for T1 telecom connections, different things like this. The list you see before you now is all those telecoms. So I'm reflecting to you the three columns. The one in the middle is the fiscal year 23 approved budget. And the blue represents what was budgeted for that amount. What you don't see is there's a great big spreadsheet that goes with this where we detail every time a cost is made. And as those costs are made, it adds up the totals that are reflected in the black font. And so for the first one on All Stream, so far we've paid them $63,872.02. And that's out of our $250,000 budget. And then we see what we have left over to pay for the rest of the year. And so this is hopefully what we're going to use to help track. So as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, we can see where monies might be left on the table. Two things about contract ones. We usually don't mess with them until we get closer to the end because we don't know how much we're going to spend because that's a monthly cost. And there's always some fluctuation, but that is something that we'll consider. But in this case, many of the numbers have already been adjusted because as we move to the next generation 911 platform, a lot of these charges go away because they're to old time telecom wireline that will no longer be relevant and no longer be required. We've also sent out notification to Lumen. And if you look on, it's down, unfortunately, the number's not reflecting. If you look at the budget amount, that's the $1,175,000. That's the budget for Lumen. And that normally runs 2.4 million. But because we're not paying for a full year, we went ahead and adjusted that down. So we already can reallocate that money. So this will change by next year. It will look vastly different. It will be shorter. There are things that we have to have for the 911 network, and that's our fiber connections, All Stream, Cox, different ones, but it will be significantly less than what we're paying right now. Any questions on our monthly contract?
Chief Rodriguez.
Hi, good morning. Chief Rodriguez with Goodyear PD. So in looking at the list there, Liz, and just maybe help me understand, or maybe the public understand, you have FirstNet that we haven't used any of that money. So just kind of wondering if I can get a high level why that's still at zero as actuals for the year. And then the other one I was looking at there is Cineverse, that we only have about 70 cents left in the budget for the rest of the year. So just making sure.
You bet.
What are those differences?
So Cineverse was one of the companies that we no longer need to do business with. So they ended their service. In fact, they decommissioned it. So we had no choice but to go off at the end of September. And that's why that's reflected so down to the penny. So we actually have 70 cents left from the Cineverse bill. The FirstNet, and I'm glad you caught that. That actually is equipment, so that needs to go in. And we'll move it down further. That's a one-time purchase of equipment that has to do with putting FirstNet into our 911 network. If you look at AT&T, down just below the division, you have a AT&T bill that we budgeted $4,500 for. It says FirstNet AT&T. That's where our FirstNet connections for the network are lying right there in that. That's the monthly bill.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I had one question. You said on the Lumen CenturyLink line, we pulled that down for the budget from what it was before, and then it was reallocated. How does that work? Like, what is the process of moving funds? Is that it's just not encumbered and the state doesn't allocate that to us, or how does that work?
So as part of our agreement with the state, when we do a budget amendment, even if we're staying within our fiscal footprint, we have to get permission from the state to reallocate one fund to the next. And that is done through a budget amendment through their grant portal. And so currently we have all of these changes that are listed here inside the the grant portal, waiting for approval. The monies have been reallocated in the issue that we're having with Phoenix PD's project being pushed to the next fiscal year. So in an effort to realign, to ensure that other PSAPs that are queuing up to get their equipment replaced, that they're not penalized because Phoenix pushed theirs from fiscal year 23 to 24. We had approached the state, Phoenix, City of Phoenix had on splitting the cost of that project to buy the equipment for Phoenix PD in this fiscal year and the services and the installation costs in next fiscal year. And then that would allow us to take two of the agencies from the fiscal year 24 and move them up early. And we spoke with Avondale and ASU. And so those monies that were changed from here were reallocated to cover the cost of those upgrades to help balance it out. This way we can stay on track on getting our equipment upgraded and meet Phoenix's needs and try to stay within our fiscal footprint.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? The next agenda item is the NG 911 project
I'm
update.
sorry, Madam Chair. I have 2 more slides on this.
Oh.
Just so you have a good idea. Okay, so I wish it was just that one slide, but it's not. Okay, so we have PSAP operations. So this is a new verbiage we're using, and this is anything that it deals directly with the PSAP, with their equipment, their maintenance, their support, upgrades, anything to keep the PSAPs going. This is what we determine as PSAP operations. And so those first 5 items are what you see as the projects that we talked about. So Phoenix PD's project, Luke Air Force Base, Avondale ASU, and then GMR is a rural metro. They go by Global Medical Response. They've changed their name, but we have them GMR rural. So those are the projects that we've slated for fiscal year 2023. And that's what that budget amendment we're waiting for approval to get and to get that done. Then we have in the blue below that, those are the PSAP requested budget items, that these are the things the PSAPs had. Example, Mesa asked for 3 additional positions. We were able to do that. And you can see this is another thing that we budgeted 75,000. It came under to 70,000, and we have $4,086.05 that we will then see if we can reallocate to some other need within the region. The logging recorders are all for Gilbert, the 2 Gilbert things. Town of Gilbert has pulled those requests. They will fund them themselves. So that money will be able to be reallocated. And 911 support. So to all the equipment that sits in front of your operators, it has annual support with it, the 911 equipment, and we pay that annual support on all those that are due annually. Project peripherals. So since we do assist in the upgrades and the maintenance and the installation, there are things that we need that the vendor doesn't provide. Server rack mounts, screws, certain types of cables, things like that is what project peripherals were. But we had purchased monitors, because we can get monitors for approximately $200 cheaper than if we buy them through the vendor. So it helps us save money on the project money. Unfortunately, we didn't factor in that we would need as many monitors for Phoenix PD. And so that's why we're 5,000 over budget, but we have a reallocation for that. So it will be taken care of. So we won't be in the red on that next time we do this report. Personnel, that it represents all the personnel, not only maintenance, but it also shows the personnel that do the 911 networking gentlemen that take care of that. And it also reflects the GIS team, and it reflects the admin support all under that. it's been a desire that we get that split out so that it's represented, so you can see how much of personnel costs go to maintenance, how much of it goes to 911 network support and admin and GIS. So we'll have that itemized. And the rest are just different things that the tech team uses, the maintenance team uses to provide support to the PSAPs, ticketing tools, spares, and then time and materials for anything that we might need that we haven't accounted for. Where the state allows us to have a $20,000 fund sitting there just in case we need it. And then I have one more slide. Or before I go, is there any questions on this slide at all?
I do have one question, and this is probably a long overdue question. So on the blue, those were the requests that were put in by the PSAPs last budget cycle, right? And I thought we had some pretty long discussions on which ones we were moving forward to the state in the PSAP managers meeting. And I thought there was a West Side agency that had requested some too. So what was actually approved through MAG, and then what was approved after the fact, if anything changed? Has anything changed from that initial discussion? Because I remember Mesa, because they were bringing on Queen Creek. Gilbert had asked because of their renovation. I thought there was a West Side. I don't know if it was one of.
It was Goodyear.
Okay, was
Well-
that approved or?
No, so the state came up with a formula that they took the total number of 911 calls received in the state, and they factored in how many 911 call taking workstations there are throughout the state, and came up with a figure of a baseline of how many calls each position should answer. Let me think, wait a second, it was what the call volume should be answered that they would need in another position. And Goodyear did not make the call volume that the state had put, so the state did not fund those positions.
And Gilbert's did?
And Gilbert's, yes, Gilbert's did and Mesa's did.
Okay. I remember Mesa and Phoenix being on the top of the list of that ratio sheet. I didn't remember what we put through.
Yeah. So this was for this fiscal year. And then for next fiscal year, we have, I want to say about 5 agencies that put into it in Goodyear as well. So
Thank you.
as soon as the grant opens up and we submit it, then we'll find out if the state will be willing to fund it. Okay, and you go to the last slide. Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
Kathy Masters, just a quick question on that last topic. When was the last time that I guess algorithm was looked at and reviewed, especially with the addition of text to 911 and additional kind of call volume intake has changed?
I don't believe that they factor in text to 911. They do it strictly by 911 calls received by the PSAP, not admin or anything else. They look strictly on 911 calls. But I can reach out to the state and see if they can give me an updated a guideline that we can review with this committee.
Thank you.
I believe the last numbers that we saw were maybe in August or September,
Yes.
just to give you an idea of when we were looking at those last. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, and then the last slide, excuse me, this has to do with our 911 data network. So the complexity of it has a lot of components, servers, routers, firewalls, all the lovely things that go with a network. So we have network equipment and we have also support that we have to pay. We have a network spares, network licenses, and then network peripherals. And that represents our 911 network that goes out to the 26 agencies. And if you recall, we do 911 call management. So we have connections with telecom carriers that connect their calls to us, and then we manage and route the 911 calls accordingly. So that's what covers under the 911 data network. And GIS, we pay a licensing fee. The city of Phoenix has an enterprise license that they use for all their areas that have mapping, and we're one of them. That invoice is prorated to each department. And so our portion runs about $50,000, just depending on the fiscal year and how much it is. So that's prorated every year. But if you look at the very end, you'll notice that the budget in black, this is what we've spent to date. You can see what was granted, and then the red is what's left over. And if you can go back to the previous slide real quick, I wanted to show something. You'll notice under the projects that none of those have had any monies put against it. So then when you see that big number, that's why. So we're anxious to get that equipment ordered and to get it, and those monies encumbered and equipment started in case there's any problems with supply chain. You can go ahead and move forward. And so that's why that number's, but our goal is to have the working group. They'll get a look at how the sausage is made. They see the detailed report of where everybody's going, and we'll come up with recommendations that we can see that would be allocations that would that they up for the needs of the region, and present that to the PSAPs, which eventually will be presented to the 911 oversight. So you'll be able to have some input on where we can reallocate funds as we find that we have overages that those funds need to be spent, so we won't have monies left on the table.
Okay, any questions on that? The next item is a report. Actually, the next agenda item is the NG 911 project update. MAG PSAP Managers Group Vice Chair Karen Sutherland and Ms. Graber will lead this discussion.
I'll go ahead and take this for Karen and I. So the NG 911 projects had quite a bumpy ride this last week. We were notified by the state on Monday last week that the project was put on pause for the Maricopa region. So we stood down our workings on getting the NG 911 core services project done. We were at the point of testing, making tests on the platform. That has been a struggle with the vendor that we've been working with. And we were on the Friday before actually successful on placing some calls through the new platform, test calls. And then unfortunately Monday we were asked to stand down. This causes great concern because being so close to it and knowing that we need to push forward no matter what the region direction goes, we still need to have an NG 911 core services. So the city of Phoenix met with the state 911 office and ADOA director and discussions on it. And this was determined that we can go ahead and start up again. So it was just only on pause a little over a week. So my technical team is back in contact with the vendor and starting to lay out moving forward, the timelines that we're moving forward so we can get this done. And the state also is, and I think Nathan touched on this a little bit, the consultant that the study committee is getting, the state is waiting for that as well. So they're wanting to know what results come back, but until then, we are moving forward with the NG 911 project.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the membership?
Chief Rodriguez, Goodyear PD. Liz, did they tell you, maybe I didn't catch it, but did they tell you why they put it on pause?
They did not. In the email that I got from Director Tobin, it just said that they would be putting on pause and they would be meeting with our fire chief. And that meeting occurred. And the direction I got from the chiefs that went, that is that it is back in it is back on, that we can start again, and that they were waiting, they would to wait for the consultant report to see, kind of deciding how to deal with MR 911.
Got it. So there'll be more information to come, I take it.
Oh, yes, yes. It's all tied together with that study committee. So
Thank you.
So I have a question. If we're going to wait for the consultant, are there concerns, like technical concerns here that that would put this on pause? Is that what the consultant is going to be reviewing? I know we talked, I mean, the study committee discussed reviewing the models, and Mr. Pryor talked about that earlier, of other metropolitan areas. But I guess I understood that to be a technical and a business model and a workflow and a support and, you know, all those things. This seems like it's a technical thing. So are there concerns that this is going to be a technical problem or something? Or do we have any idea what this?
I have no idea. I don't even want to comment on it because I don't want to guess in this meeting about what it could be, but I'm glad that it's back on track.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, the next item is a report on 911 outages around the state, including the Maricopa region. Ms. Graber will lead this discussion.
This was a request that came from Chief Walker with Phoenix Fire, and he and so in trying to gather the information, there's a couple of things that I found out significantly is that nobody wants to share 911 outages, no vendors, nobody wants to say how long their systems have been out. So all I could gather was from newspaper clippings. And I don't know how reliable the report that was. The outages depending, and then the other challenge is what is considered an outage. And I think this is something the FCC struggles with as well, because different entities describe outage as different things. So is it an outage if, for instance, Chandler PD is unable to take 911 calls, but their calls are being routed to Tempe? That in many of the telecom providers' terms is not a 911 outage. But if you're Chandler PD, that is a 911 outage. Also, there's a question is if it's just one call impacted, or if Alley, the location information, is at an outage. You have the voice. That is not considered an outage unless you're a PSAP, and some PSAPs consider that an outage when they can't get location information. So with the idea of going on, how many 911 centers went down in the last year? None for Maricopa region. We haven't had any outages to our network centers that were not planned. Now we have examples of where they're going to change out a UPS or it's a scheduled outage. But to have it go up because the 911 system failed, we have none of those. We've had them where Chandler was struck by lightning, not Chandler, I'm sorry, Scottsdale was struck by lightning, so their system went down, but that once again is caused from something other than a 911 system failure.
Thank you, Ms. Graber. Any questions or comments from the membership? Next item is a report on a legal agreement with the state. Ms. Graber will lead this discussion.
So we were requested to report on the data sharing agreement that we have tried to establish with the state. The state hired a analytical company to gather all the 911 information from all the PSAPs. And we did this without a data sharing agreement. And then there was concerns because of the data that's being shared. The data is what we call raw data, and that means it's everything. It's the name of the person calling, if it's a wireline, phone numbers, dates, times, things like that. So some concerns on private information that's being shared with this company. And we reached out to the state and asked for, sent them a draft of a data agreement that we would do as a whole from MAG. So we didn't have to have agencies individually do it. And the state felt like they didn't have it, they don't need it. So it's a question of who owns the data. Does it the agency that's answering the calls and operators are handling the traffic own it, or who owns the data? So we've always worked as that the PSAP owns the data. I don't release your data. So if someone asks, saying we need how quickly you answered phone calls, that's up to your agency. Some agencies post that on their website, and that's fine, but that's a determination the agency makes, not us. So that is where we're kind of at. We're at a stalemate. I did, so in the 911 grant, the agreement that the city of Phoenix does every year with the state on accepting the grant funds, and I'll read from it just so you can understand what it says. The grantee agrees to cooperate and participate with any and all assessments, evaluation, evidence, or information on data collection requests, and acknowledge that the state grant or agency has the right to obtain, reproduce, publish, or use the data provided this award in accordance with applicable statutes, rules, and guidelines. So we would still be able to meet those, that clause, either through having a data agreement where they have access to the raw data and they would run the reports. If that is not something that is doable, then we would be able to do it through public records requests. We could generate those reports so that we would mandate that the PSAPs provide a call volume, whatever it is, kind of report. We'll say call volume and call answer times, that they're required to submit those that they run and submit the report itself instead of having access to the raw data. So that's kind of where we're at this point. No movement has been made on it since we came to this impasse, but I believe they're waiting to see how everything sorts out with the study committee, and then perhaps the answer will come through there.
Are there any questions or comments from the membership on this topic?
Chief Rodriguez, Goodyear PD. Have we released any data
Yeah, they're getting the data now,
unredacted?
unredacted. It's not recordings. It's all of the data that has the name. So it's say, Mrs. Jones, 123 Main Street, Goodyear, Arizona.
I kind of have an issue with that. We have a duty to protect our victims, and usually that's who's calling 911 on their worst day. And, there's state statute that says that we need to protect those victims of domestic violence and certain crimes. So I would definitely caution that we probably really need to look at this before we release any more data, and then try to figure that out instead of them continuously getting it. So I definitely think it's an issue.
I know we had some discussions before on, what information could be used. And I'm definitely not suggesting that anybody is intending to use anything nefarious, the data nefariously, but just the due diligence that we have the responsibility to know exactly where that data is going. So I think there's some other scenarios that we've batted around. You have a critical incident, officer involved shooting or something like that. I'm not sure we even want to release all of the volume, even the call volume right there and the answer times and things like that, because sure, a FOIA request would work on that. But just knowing where it goes and under what circumstances, I feel like is a responsible decision. So what would be our choices moving? I mean, is this need to go to the study committee, or is this something that we could work directly with the state on? And then to your point, Chief, if I understand, these devices are at the network operations centers. Are we can we opt in as an agency, opt out as an agency? Do we want to look at this as a membership and as a region to maybe put this on pause while we evaluate it? I feel like I would probably need to work with my agency if we're going to, do this agency specific on whether my agency just pushes pause. But I do wonder if as a region, we should, what are our alternatives? I guess my question is.
So other agencies, just so you know, Chief Rodriguez, have expressed that same concerns because it is just raw data going to them. And having a data sharing agreement so that that information is protected and there are some guarantees would help ease their minds. But if we can't get that data agreement right now, it's connected into our 2 network centers that MR 911 has. What would happen then is we would, if MAG approved, we would have to shut those off. And then it would either be satisfied, so we could keep our agreement, would be satisfied that the state would give us what reports they want, and then your PSAT managers would run those with regulatory, or that if you wanted to have you wanted that information, the direct connection, and not run the reports and let them have all your data, that then you would have an agreement with them as well. Just the city of Goodyear, the city of Chandler, such, those would be the options at that point. So whether they do us as a region an agreement, whether we just provide the reports, they tell us all the reports and we provide them, or individual cities.
Yeah, without seeing what's going there, obviously, I'm just going by what's being discussed here. I do think that, and I'll go back as soon as we leave here and talk to our dispatch center to see if I can get a better look at what's going on. But, to Mrs. Potts' message also, some of these are felony cases. And even if you did put in a FOIA request, they wouldn't get processed right away because there's a due diligence to keep that case as secure as possible, because we still want, to go to court. We still are doing investigations and so forth. And I'm not saying that maybe that data doesn't get out there, but we got to do our due diligence to protect our officers, our staff, our victims, and our community when it comes to that stuff, because information does get out.
Yeah. And Chief, to also, the state says that they don't want to look at the alley, and that's fine, but it's still being sent to their provider, whoever that's running. So that's where, that provider has all that information. And so especially with that third party, we would want a data sharing agreement or some sort of restriction. So
there has to be a restriction, some type of pause, and we need to, definitely go back and figure it out. If they don't need that data, then why send it? So then it takes care of everything, right? So, and there might be some sensitive data that we may play catch up with because of the criminal aspect or the due diligence of a criminal procedure.
So, is it possible to tier or filter the data that's being sent, or is it all or nothing?
with the current platform that the provider has now, it has to be a raw data feed. So
Is that like the CDR? Is that what they're
Mhm,
sending? Okay,
that's the CDR, the call detail record.
okay. I don't have any issues running reports for the state. I can see the value of having a call volume. I think it benefits everybody and it gives the state a good vision or visibility into what's happening in the state. So I have no problems saying what our volumes are and things like that. I think answer times were another thing that came up in the past. And I think some of the discussion is if it's not legislated that we meet certain answer times, it is an industry standard and a best practice that our entire region, I think we voted and put into our governance that we're going to adhere to. And I know we report to the city manager on our answer times. So I don't have a problem sending those up. Those are public record as well. But, I guess some of the other concerns maybe that I would maybe want addressed is if the state were to get a FOIA request, do they know what information? I know our legal advisors know what to give. I mean, to your point on these cases, but does the state have that experience on what we might, or is there even communication on that? So I think maybe we can add those. So would it be from this point, is this something that we need to consider adding to the next agenda item to go to a vote on whether we pull this as or push pause on this as a region, or because we can't opt out as a single agency is what you're saying, right?
Correct. This is a network at the network center, so it has everybody.
So is that something that we can do, is put this to a vote next time at the next 911 oversight?
Yeah, we can make that an agenda item, and that will give us time to get a little more options of what we can do and give time for the agencies to go back and talk to their departments to see what your feelings are, so that we know all 26 agencies, how they feel about if they have no issue, what their input would be, and maybe we can formulate a plan, but we can put that on the next meeting that with an actionable item attached to it.
And then because it's all or nothing, is the reason for that, is that because of where it's deployed on the network, or is that something that is vendor specific that we could ask them an adjustment?
It is because it's deployed on our network centers. If you wanted to individually, I don't know if I might give out, you would need to, we would coordinate a piece of equipment installed in each PSAP, and that would be the device, the box that would be the agreement between the state and that PSAP.
What's the lift on pulling them from the network centers and then putting them in the individual PSAPs?
At first blush, turning it off wouldn't be that detailed, but that could be done. But we would want to, but to put the box in, we need to coordinate that with the vendor, because we have to give them access, make sure there's power, rack space, all the fun technical things that go with adding a new component.
So it's a bit of a lift then. Okay. All right. Yeah, if we could put that on the agenda for next time, I think that might be worthwhile. Any other questions or comments? I'm sorry.
Kathy? Chief Masters?
Thank you. I just had a quick comment. In Tempe, we are actually going through something very similar. We have a research project that our city has entered into that encumbers the PD on a data sharing agreement. And we are currently deciding what to release and how to release information. So I'll be interested to see kind of where this goes on 911 data. I mean, obviously this encumbers the system itself, not necessarily the, like we use Versaterm. So ours is accessing it via our vendor. But it may provide some direction and some precedent to us as to how we release information, but they want unredacted information. And so obviously we're trying to protect PII. And so, and it directly impacts 911. So I'll be interested to see and further discuss where this goes, because it may provide us some direction. So just want to appreciate keeping this on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? The next item is a discussion on supplemental technology, and I'll lead this discussion. So this topic came up with the recent upgrades that we've had around the region. We've had some agencies that are transitioning from Entrado over to Vesta. And with that came some of the discussion of the supplemental technology, specifically citizen input, which is the live stream video and smart transcription. So the state has agreed to pay for that. And so I guess my discussion here today is, do we want to, I think that is vendor specific, and it was an add-on to the upgrades, but is there a benefit maybe to stepping back and having the discussion of what supplemental technology do we want to bring into the region? What supplemental technology is really the best that's out there, not just an addition to existing equipment. And then maybe what do we want to take forward to the state to ask what they might pay for? So for example, on the new citizen input, the live stream video that's coming with Vesta, and it's been a big topic. One of my issues, we've had live stream video since 2019, and it's through a different industry partner. But one of the things with citizen input is my understanding is you can only send the live stream link with an active 911 call, which is not the standard practice of any of the other live stream videos. So for example, on any of the other vendors that I am aware of, you can send a live stream video link through a 10-digit to a 10-digit number. So you can do it third party. You can do it on a disconnected 911 call, and you can do it on a 911 active call. So I'm just wondering if we are looking at budget considerations, budget concerns, and this is going to be taking out of the overarching budget, and we're going to be saying that we support live stream video moving forward. Should we step back and maybe evaluate what industry partners are out there? And is this the best direction that we want to be going as a region, is adding citizen input, or if we should be looking at all the vendors? And then from a greater standpoint, should we be evaluating anything that's supplemental from maybe the emerging technologies working group through the PSAT managers, and just doing the research? Because I do think this was an easy answer to add citizen input because it was coming with Vesta, so I can understand that. I'm not sure that it's the best option as a region moving forward, because we all know once you go in, you're locked in for a while. It's very difficult to bring it back. So I don't know if there's any discussion that anyone else wants to weigh in on this, but I do wonder if we just want to step back, number one, and look at it all. And number two, what is the state willing to pay for? So, I mean, I have 911i as our vendor. Will the state be willing to reimburse? It's the same technology as citizen input, but I'm an Entrado user. So is that different, or can we make that ask? So 2 questions there that I would open it up for discussion.
Kathy Masters from Tempe. I'll start by saying, we're one of the agencies that are kind of waiting for those add-ons to be delivered. And so I think for us, because we're waiting for it, the question would be if we go out and do this study in order to determine what's best for the region, what does that do to for our addendum in terms of the additional projects or the additional piece, because that's something that I would have to answer to is, the fulfilling of our Vesta upgrade. And so that's my number one question. Number two is, I think in terms of keeping those addendums or upgrades available because of the ability, hopefully, to reimburse the existing contract. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but basically we know that that's a something that they can get at least for now. And I like your thought process, Michelle, of seeing what's out there, and would the state be willing to provide additional add-ons, but does that delay getting a service in place for agencies who don't otherwise already have it, or might not be able to get something else because it's cost prohibitive by doing it through other means. So just a thought, making sure that it's available and that we don't delay offering a service to an agency that might need it. But I like the idea of exploring it, and what are the options of swapping later, offering it as, in part of their cyclical upgrades. I don't know if that makes sense, but when they come around for an upgrade in their 6-year upgrade, that they would then be able to add on the service as part of their existing upgrade, whether it's a Vesta or an Entrado product or a third-party product. I don't know if any of that made sense. It made sense in my head, but now it sounds like rambling.
No, thank you. I do think you bring up a good point, and maybe this is a question for you, Ms. Graber. If an agency opts in for citizen input and smart transcription, is that contractual for the 6 years or is it annual?
That is a good question. So no, because it's an annual support, so I would think, and would obviously have legal look at it, but I would think you'd be able to stop and ask, you're no longer requiring this component and you wouldn't pay the annual support. It's not locked in with 5-year support that you've paid for upfront. So I would believe that you'd be able to do that. And in answer to your first question, Kathy, we are not holding back on processing those requests for the agencies that requested specifically for VESTA input, citizen input. We are just waiting to get this first wave of amendment approved and then to submit the agency's wants for the for citizen input and the other components that you requested.
So Chief Masters, I do agree. We don't want to hold up anything. I almost wonder if there's a process, and maybe this is again, emerging technologies working group where we, before we jump in the deep end and commit to something, maybe we stop and say, what's out there? And is this the best solution? I know that when we turned ours up in, 2 weeks or something. So it's not a quick turn up for at least 911i with the integration even into Rapid SOS, which can integrate into CAD or a mapping system, anything. So I think there's options out there. I think even there's another vendor out there that does non-emergency text, picture and video live stream. They do the smart transcription in multiple languages, and they'll even mirror your text to 911 onto your screen. So there's so much out there. And I feel like this was I can get this too. And I'm going to check the box, and we jumped real quick into it. And it doesn't have the full functionality that is out there by pretty much every other vendor. So is this something that maybe we can kick to the working group to say, what is it that we want in the region? Let's look at the different partners that are available out there, maybe what the cost is, and then maybe approach the state to see if they would be willing to pay, regardless if it's VESTA. If they're willing to pay for citizen input, it seems intuitive to me that they would pay for the technology, regardless of where it comes from. I mean, short of it being, 5 times as much, of course, but so I don't know if that's something that they can take on.
Absolutely. I'll take that back to the working group and have them start taking a look at it and see, what can we get and what's the most effective and what's the most costly, and are they both the same thing, or what our options are out there. But I will engage the PSAP working group so they can start looking and kicking the tires of the components to see, what is out there and what can help your agencies the best.
Thank you. There's no more questions or comments. Are there any requests from members for an item on a future agenda? Are there any comments or announcements from the membership? Okay, the next meeting of the 911 Oversight Team will be on Wednesday, March 8th, 2023 at 10 a.m. with no further business.